Okay, well, thank you for coming to the first CPI event of the year. And obviously, this is the first time we use this room. This is Harold W. Lawrence old facility. You can see Lawrence's old office here, as it was when he was founding director, as it was when he started. That room is basically for the Arctic NRT and other activities. That's the Gordon Hamilton Memorial Office, a colleague of ours, and then other graduate offices. We'll be trying to use this quite a bit. If we could start with the very first slide. This is a very quick introduction to the Institute. We realize that some of you have seen this before, some of you are new, but we haven't actually had a chance to really meet together before. So let me just describe a few things. The slogan for the Institute is exploration and discovery. When we talk about exploration, it's exploration in the four different things that our Institute does. We look at climate change physically, chemically, biologically, and socially. And there's a tremendous amount of exploration that still needs to go on in all of these fields. We may very well think that we understand exactly what's happening. We know that the planet is being changed dramatically, but there are a lot of surprises in store for us for the future. Things aren't just going to progress in a nice, simple linear way. There are a lot of impacts, and anybody who's been in this field more than 10 years realizes that the significance of climate change has changed dramatically compared to what it was before. It also stands exploration for exploration in new geographic areas, new opportunities, etc. And the second part of that, discovery. Our institute, as of this year, is 50 years old. On November 18th, we'll have a big celebration. We hope that you can all come and join us for dinner and hear some of our invited speakers and celebrate with us something that's actually quite important. We are one of, if not the oldest multidisciplinary climate research unit, I'd say in the world, and probably wrong, but I'm a little bit biased, certainly in North America and maybe even in the world. And that's a very big deal. And that means that when it comes to discovery, we obviously over the last 50 years have made some serious contributions. We've made transformational contributions in terms of scientific understanding, shifting paradigms in the understanding of climate change in all of those things, physical, chemical, biological, and social. And also, we have begun, as time goes on, to become more and more involved in modern issues related to climate change, as represented by some of the new faculty that we have joined us. If you look down to the next level here, you'll see the three timeframes that we're primarily interested in the Institute. One, of course, is the present. And if you take a look at the instrumental record goes back about 100 years. We have an amazing tool developed by Sean Burkle, Climate Reanalyzer, that allows us to do state-of-the-art type examination, and then of course is remotely sensed data. It's critical to understand this information and much more about present day in order for us to be able to look back in time and also project towards the future. The other thing that makes us quite unique is the fact that we go back in time. And back in time means looking back in time as much as a couple of million years. And why do we do that? We do that because, of course, not everything that has ever happened to the climate system has happened in the last 100 years. So we want to find out what is the dynamic range of the climate system, how fast do things change, etc. And ultimately, and these are the tools that we use for these things. There's Climate Reanalyzer, lake cores, ice cores, cosmogenic dating of rocks, and the purpose ultimately for all of these things is to not only understand where we are today, which alone is not a simple task, but to make better projections for the future. If you take a look at the map here, we don't have all the dots on that map of where we work, but we work on every single continent on the planet. And one way or another, we have something to do with every single major ocean body or marine body on the planet. Obviously, we bring an awful lot of this information back to Maine. We are a research university within Maine. We're the #1 research university. basically because we're almost the only one left. And we are an R1 university, which is the very highest level, according to the people who, the Carnegie, the people who rate these things. It puts us in the very smallest upper percent of universities that conduct research, which has only happened last year and is a very, very big deal for the university. A demonstration of all of the things that we have done, faculty, students, and staff. Speaking of staff, we have an amazing technical staff that runs the 11 different laboratories that are attached to the Institute, and we have an amazing staff in the office, Becky Dexy and Betty Lee, who not only along this particular case with Andre put this particular event together, but put many of these events together, keep us from overspending our money, looking at it correctly, not getting in trouble with the government. And as you begin to think more and more about what they do on literally a 24/7 basis, many of us work in the field, problems occur in different time zones and different places, and they're always there to help us out and do the things that we do. So we have a very great spatial and temporal reach in the Institute. And we're very proud of it. We're very proud of everybody who's been involved, who've made major contributions to science. And we will continue to do that for the next 50 years, if not longer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Seth, who is the graduate coordinator for the Institute, and then followed by Andre, both faculty members who, and Andre will talk about some of the technical details related to being a graduate student and understanding what's going on here.
Okay, so as Paul said, I'm Seth Campbell, graduate coordinator. My office is in Sawyer 119, so it's downstairs, the first floor of Sawyer. And so my role was basically to try to help graduate students become welcome as part of CCI. And that's everything from helping you get familiar with the resources we have, the faculty we have, opportunities that we have available for you as graduate students who are trying to develop your skills and your career path moving forward. So I'm not gonna, these are the things, some of the things that I do that relate to you. So it's everything from helping you gather your paperwork together when you come on to the university to helping you submit your paperwork to actually graduate from the university today, providing resources to you. If you have questions about any CCI policies or university policies, that kind of falls on my wheelhouse. On top of that, I'm involved in helping set up the CCI research assistantship. So CCI has 3 research assistants every year, and those assistantships are paid. We got 3 this year. Kaylee Manello, Mikhail Roshini, which I have not met yet. Mikhail right here? Maybe? Or online? Maybe. And then Karina Cortiro Robles, we've got him on that as well.
I'm here.
Awesome, super. It's nice to meet you. I can meet you all. So these 3 folks are also super important for CCI in a way because they also participate in some CCI functions and university main functions to gather information that's also useful for you all as graduate students. So Kaylee is on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. Mikhail is the CCI graduate student representative. So what that means is that they will attend the faculty meetings as a participant to kind of provide grad student input into the faculty or take information from the faculty and be able to provide it for you all as graduate students. And then Karina will be working as the CCI graduate student representative. So what that means is they will be participating in GSP events, looking at reviewing applications for funding. So if you're not aware of this, the graduate student government often provides funding every year for graduate students participating in conferences or other research activities. So it's well worth kind of knowing the ropes on that. So these 3 will be working hand in hand to pass information along to each other. And they kind of act as your representatives. If you have questions, concerns, ideas, feel free to approach them, ask them, and I told them if they don't know the answer, I'm your go-to person for asking questions. So always feel free to reach out to me, pop by the office, send me an email. I'm always available to chat about things. Of course, you all are graduate students, so you're aware of the MS program, and we also have a certificate program here right now. The certificate program is is a certificate in interdisciplinary climate studies. If you're not aware of that, check it out on the website. We also have students that complete independent PhD programs through CTI. So you finish your master or certificate, want to move forward beyond that, by all means, reach out talking about that and building on the possibilities there. And I want to close with a few opportunities already that are important for you all to be aware of. So on the right hand side, you see a list of some student opportunities that we have. The CTI Churchill Exploration Fund comes from longtime supporters of the program, Dan and Betty Churchill. They donated a significant portion of money, and every year we have a fair amount of funds to support students traveling for research and various venues. So those details, I believe they come out usually in January. Is that correct, Paul? We also have recently awarded the CCI Sturgis Exploration Fund to another funding source, same timeframe for that. And then Paul had mentioned the Gordon Hamilton Memorial Office here. Unfortunately, Gordon passed away a few years ago. We have a new fund that will be starting this coming year, supporting student activities. And I mentioned the graduate student government grants. A number of our students have also received main space grants. They're generally up to about $6,000. They're funded through one of the offices at Maine. So come see me if you're interested. They support a number of my students and some of our faculties. They usually there's summer funding, but they also have some academic year funding opportunities as well. And then the last thing I'll mention is UArctic is a international organization. Our representative for the state for CTI is Carl Kreutz, and often they have opportunities for you to serve on committees. They often have funding opportunities that are listed. So if you have any interest in that, by all means, reach out to Carl Kreutz for that. I think that's all I have for now. So I'll pass it on.
I'd like to welcome all new Climate Change Institute members, and this is a brief outline of what I will be covering in the next couple of minutes, and a couple of slides available. Just a reminder that you should be able to access this presentation and entire sequence of slides to Google Drive. So if you go to Google Drive, you will see something recently shared, and you will see the document. So all of these links are active, so you can click on them, and it will take you to the website where you can get more information. So first element I would like to talk about is CCI lab, facilities, equipment, field gear, and policy. So general policy is a common sense. So you can access all these facilities online, and you will see a person who is in charge of a certain unit or certain lab. So normal common sense tells you first, before you get into the door and grab something from a lab, you pretty much want to talk to somebody who actually runs this place. That's a common sense. I strongly recommend you to do that, because I've seen kind of people do it in reverse. They do something and then they kind of ask questions. So ask questions and you never will break any rules. So that's a common sense policy. Thing for the field gear, there's a lot of field gear. We have a building field gear. So if you're there with your advisor and you see something that doesn't necessarily yours, just ask questions. Don't just grab it and take it with you to the next expedition and then put it back dirty. There's like a laundromat there, like you can do some cleaning for the field gear. With a couple of other nice items, always attractive, shiny boxes there. Just be careful. Policy for Humane IT and software. So the University of Maine actually recently did a remarkable job acquiring this really good software. So you can actually go to this link and you will see a list of software. So you can run all this Microsoft product, there are lots of products for like MATLAB, Mathematica. If you're interested in some open source and free tools, email me. I will send you some free stuff like the links of the tools packages. Generally, university probably providing you with this foundational basic kind of toolbox that you can use. At the institute, we're trying to use Google. It's not really particular preferences. That's how it happens. So we're not endorsing Google products. There is another kind of Microsoft Drive and other products that are available. Some of them have issues with Macs or Linux systems, but they're all not perfect. So you have to make your own decision, and the best one, talk to your advisor, because you really want to be compatible with your environment. So if you send this in some obscure format that nobody could read, first of all, you need to make your right? So if they can read your thesis, you probably will graduate soon. So there's a link to thesis and like dissertation templates. You can actually go away and download the template, and I encourage you to do that. If you can open it and you can format and change the biography and put your name there, so you can always have a document that you can submit in a year or 2 or 3, whatever you're trying to say here, or a decade. So this is something I really learned recently as a therapy manager. I really like the system. It actually has a lot of layers of complexity. And if you just want to use it, it's easy. You can go and register. I think it's reasonably safe. I wouldn't put the same password they use for banking, but do something that common sense. But it's actually a very interesting system. If you're really picky, you can actually set up the system using your own without paying a penny. When you can have several computers synchronizing all the PDFs, and you can actually able to access it from like different systems, and you can run and write like documents from different computers anywhere in the world, and everything will work great. So Zotero is really good, and you can use it with Google products or Microsoft products or Open LibreOffice or free OpenOffice stuff. So it just works. It's really good. I also recommend you to download this little software from a library. So if you kind of find a paper somewhere and you want to just download the PDF, just simply clicking on this link will actually help you to get through all the security that university puts on the library, and you will be able to get this PDF. Not everything university has, but university has pretty decent digital library and access. So we can, most of us using it, so you shouldn't have a lot of problems. Obviously, if you want, you can go and talk to the library and visit interlibrary loan, and they will help you to get some missing papers that you cannot get to. New old media. So we had this issue a couple of years ago where people were like creating the, social media accounts, and they would sort of talk about something like, for example, climate change, like it was endorsed by the institute. It could get you in trouble pretty fast. So just be careful and make it clear when you're making statements on social media, you're not really endorsed by the Climate Change Institute. If you want something like this, it's a good idea to run through the institute. Just email Betty and she'll figure out the right person to talk to. It's very simple, but it could get you in a lot of trouble because social media is constantly changing. You don't know who owns it, but we all know why they exist, right? It's basically to create some ads, some dollar money that they want to advertise. So they like this kind of hot news events. So just be careful. You want to graduate, you don't want to be in a news story. Email demands. So basically, it's managed. It's a Gmail. It's managed by this university net system. So make sure your account is active because that's how we know who you are, and we email you if we want something from you. We also share documents with you using this account. So if you have some Gmail account, funny bunny something, it's really hard for us to figure out that it's coming from a proper source. So we would prefer if you will use your official email to communicate with us, and also make sure you're always responding to email. So you don't need to write long notes, but say something. Thank you, got it, received. Just confirm, because nowadays when everything goes to spam folder, we never know if you got anything or not. And sometimes, like I'm spending hours trying to track my undergraduate students that I'm supposed to get, and they told me they never got an email. So, and it's a mystery place where everything goes. CCI website. So I'll show you a couple of slides. You all pretty much automatically create an account. We'll show you how to do it, and there's a link there. We also have a YouTube channel for the institute, and the way it works, some of these meetings get recorded and it goes to this YouTube channel. So if you make some nice video during your tenure here, let us know. We can post it on a link to this YouTube channel or add it to our playlist. It's always a good idea, and this is kind of a good way to advertise institute and also your affiliation and your work. And also I'll cover a news section in a couple of minutes. So anybody have any questions? This is suspiciously quiet. Okay, good. So we can move on. So personal website. So usually the way it works when we know that you made it to the institute, right? Betty will create an account and she would set up this website. Reality is you can actually request from a web services account in the system, and you can access and attend this free training. And you will be able to manage your personal space, which is great because you can update your resume, you can update your profile, especially when you're looking for a job. It's always good to have like official good presence with a good institute that's almost 50 years old. So definitely will benefit you long term. Again, it's run by Division of Marketing and Communication, and they have really good support and they're very nice to deal with. So anyway, next please. News items. So if you have some news, this is an example. Again, the way the website works in our website is like a major hub of communication. So we're not using social media, as you can see. We do use it to some degree through other channels, but generally this is all information we have at the CCI go through this institute's website that runs by university. So if you have a news, again, email it to Betty and she will be able to post it there, and you will get this additional advertisement. Quite often when you're publishing something, they will tell you about the paper when it will be released. So potentially you can work with a Union Media. Again, that's a good venue if you want to advertise your work, which is very important for funding and also to keep sort of an institute growing. Next item is field expeditions, I believe, right? Yep. So again, there's a tradition here, it's almost 20 years now, that when people go somewhere, they take pictures, they write some narratives, and they put out some kind of credits to funding agency to actually make it happen. So you can actually go back to 20 years and look for this really old expedition. I encourage you to do it. It's a nice and interesting sort of place to visit if you have time. And you can also see the history of the exploration here at the Institute. And also you can be part of it. So when you get the style of writing, you can actually do something like this when you come back. And you're flying back or driving from a remote north of main field, and you can actually put together some interesting like notes and have it on the expedition website. And I think that's it. Yeah. So what we're gonna do now? We're gonna have all the faculty. They listed on this little scheduled events, so you can see who is going first. And really help with it.
It's Cha.
Okay, so Cha, so he's actually going to be a good example because I can see him on the Zoom, and normally what we want to do, people unmute themselves, we will put slide up. They will see it on the Zoom that we're sharing the slide. They will talk, hopefully we will see them on the largest screen here. If not, we will just see Charles and people on the left here. And if people do it in person, please approach here. Again, don't use the site if you can, because there's a lot of cables at some points in the video. And you just come here, talk. Microphone is right here. Try to keep the microphone, and that's it. And once we finish faculty introductions, we will ask students to stand up, say something about you, like a very short, why you're here, what's your program, who's your advisor. And then, good news is you can go and grab pizza. So if you're really great, you get the best choice. I don't know. It's a good deal, but that's in my mind. First student, I think it was a good deal. Anyway, Joe, I think we'll let you start and see how it all works.
Oh, sorry, wrong way.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for letting me go first. I have a weird schedule problem today. Anyway, I'm Sudarshan Jawate. I go by Chow. I'm a computer scientist. Basically, I have my primary appointment in the School of Computing and Information Science and a cooperating appointment in the Climate Change Institute. So I'm going to talk about, I work primarily in data management and algorithms, but perhaps the most relevant thing for most people here is my work on what I call data plumbing. And one of the problems with my work is that it doesn't generate any good pictures at all. I mean, not compared to what most of the other people here have to show you. So I went looking for plumbing pictures, and well, don't do that. There's some really gross stuff out there. So I picked one that is, I think, not too bad. But that's kind of the point, you know, plumbing is, it's messy and downright dirty, but it's also essential. So, so if we think about what I call the data pipeline, And you can see the example of that on the right. I'm not going to go through all that stuff. So I work primarily in the stuff that I've highlighted in red or pink or whatever it shows up as out there. That's not the smart thing to do, by the way. The smart people, they work in the other stuff, okay? Like especially down there, like grant supersizing, that's where all the smart people work. But once in a while, the smart people, they need plumbing, you know? So upstairs, you've got this gilded bathtub, but it's not going to do any good if your downstairs looks like that picture. So sometimes you've got to fix that stuff, and that's where I come in, at least for this part of my work. So I'm going to keep this short so that, especially since I'm going first, I don't want to be late. I'll leave it at that. I'll just add one thing, that from the computer science point of view, the interesting questions are, what part of this messy stuff can be automated? And it's surprising both ways, both what can be automated and what cannot be automated. And the other thing I'll say is, you know, don't be overly impressed by the gilded bathtubs of deep learning and the popular phrase of the day. You still need the plumbing. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Sorry I'm not with you in person today, but I'm Cindy Eisenhower. I'm an associate professor with a joint appointment in both the Department of Anthropology and in the Climate Institute. My work is primarily focused on global environmental governance, so environmental policy, particularly climate policy. And a lot of it is linked to this idea of how do we address the climate impact of all of the stuff that we extract, produce, buy, consume, dispose of. So it has to do with the materials economy and how can we transform our economic systems away from linear models and towards more circular economic models. So I have a couple of different research projects that exist on different scales, but today I'll talk about the international work I'm doing, which has to do with tracking how climate negotiators are accounting for or not the emissions associated with materials flows. And part of the reason for that, I mean, faculty have heard me talk about this a lot, but it has to do with the way that we set up our emissions accounting schemes, so such that we track them based on production. So the emissions emitted within a given territorial boundary, so a given nation's boundaries, and we don't do a really good job of tracking the emissions associated with globally traded goods. And so for me, that has some pretty serious justice-based implications in that the affluent, highly developed and consuming countries don't have to take emissions responsibility for a lot of the goods they import, and instead those costs are displaced or essentially shifted into developing country contexts. So that's me, and happy to meet you all again. Sorry I'm not there, but please do reach out if you have any questions or want to talk more about shared interests. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dominic Winsky. I'm a research assistant professor here in the Climate Change Institute. I also teach in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences and in ecology and environmental science. So my research deals with sort of the past interaction between sort of global forcing, sort of what's going on in the world in terms of global climate, and then how that's expressed on regional scales. So whether that be patterns of temperature, winds, precipitation, wildfire, any of that, I'm really interested in how these regional systems respond to sort of global scale forcing. And the way I do this is using ice cores. So from both mountain regions as well as both the northern and southern high latitudes, I go and collect ice cores, bring them back to our university and our collaborators, and then analyze them for a whole suite of, physical and geochemical proxies. So if you're interested in past climate and studying it, especially in the polar alpine regions, I'd love to meet you and talk about your work and if I can help with that. Thanks, everyone. That's it.
I'm not. She was supposed to be, but she also had labs, so,
Okay, well, we can just.
all right,
go to the next.
we'll go right on to Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Ruskin. I'm faculty in ecology and environmental sciences with a home unit in School of Biology and Ecology and affiliation with the Climate Change Institute. And my office is now here in Ryan, 123. I am a conservation ecologist at heart, so I'm interested in questions like how do our ecosystems work? How are humans impacting our ecosystems, and how can we ensure that our ecosystems persist in the future? I started at CCI studying little brown birds threatened by sea level rise, but I have more recently taken these questions into contexts like how are stakeholders of public lands like Acadia National Park prioritizing how we manage these resources, especially in the face of environmental change. And a project that I'm working on now, I'm really excited about, with a PhD student, Paul White, who couldn't be here tonight because of class, is looking at experiential learning and how that improves STEM learning outcomes and sense of belonging within the STEM community. We're doing some of this work as part of the research learning experience effort here on campus and surveying many courses. Some of those that are taught by people here in this room. So thank you for distributing those surveys to your students. And trying to figure out what makes people really take to heart, feel like they belong in the STEM community, concerned about environmental issues, etc. So if any of these topics interest you, please feel free to reach out. Thanks. I'll be careful.
I was just thinking about it.
Hi, everybody, I'm Alan. It's really nice to see you here, those of you here in person. And I love mud and all the stories that it holds. I am primarily a paleoceanographer, which means that I study the history of the oceans, and my particular interests have to do with ocean climate interactions and the carbon cycle in particular. And to do this work, we do a combination of field work and laboratory work. We go out on research vessels to collect material that's been building up on the seafloor for hundreds, thousands, millions, tens of millions of years. And then we bring it back to the laboratories and ask it questions. And my primary mode of inquiry involves geochemistry. I'm a geochemist by training, and since I wasn't there during these past climate modes that we're interested in learning about, I asked foraminifera, who are single-celled organisms who were there, and they make these hard shells that are preserved on the seafloor, sometimes for a long time. And my group involves graduate students and undergraduate students and collaborators all over campus and the world. And we are currently working in places like the Gulf of Maine, Southern Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific Ocean to answer crucial questions like Paul was mentioning in the very beginning, introduction of, how has climate changed in the past? What are the boundaries? What are the modes of variability? How fast can it change? These are all questions that we are really interested in. And we get to play with mud. So if you're interested in any of that, I'm very happy to chat. Resources that are available. We have the sedimentology lab that's downstairs on the first floor. We've got mass spectrometry facilities where we work that are run by some of our amazing technical staff that CCI supports. And I also teach multiple classes in the Earth and Climate Science department, including paleoceanography, marine geology, sedimentology, and stratigraphy, energy and seminar. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. My office is on the first floor in this building. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Elvia Schmidt. I'm the news postdoc. I'm sure you know us. Working with Jacqueline Gill. I would call myself an interactions ecologist. So I'm really interested in how are humans interacting, whether that means communities with their ecosystem, or communities and communities interacting with each other. So my PhD work, I did my PhD and my master at the University of Wyoming. Basically, to sum that up, looking at using paleobotanical methods from deep time in modern ecosystems to create this analogous record, and specifically thinking about plants and insects. There pretty much is not a single subject of ecology that I'm not incredibly annoyingly excited about, especially if it has to do with plants and insects. So what I'm really excited about doing here at Climate Institute and with faculty is looking at fern communities and trying to understand them in a way of maybe shifting the thinking of how fern communities are taking over, dominating the ecosystem, following large disturbance events. So we, think about me. I love this picture. The African impact is terrifying. The PPG when the dinosaurs were killed off, or just smaller scale disturbances. And so why are fern communities so successful at reforming in the United States? And so to do this, I pull things, I love being in the gray area of ecology. I've worked with chemical analyses to modern niche theory and everything between. And so we're using a lot of different tools to really understand that, the tricks and lots and lots of things. So if anybody needs it, I'm a lawyer, 210, if everyone talk about food ecology or just ecosystems in general.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hari. I'm a postdoc here. I started here 5 months back. I'm working with Professor Christie on icebergs melting of the iceberg, sub-level melting of the iceberg. So this, why we are doing this? First place, we are doing this to budget the freshwater floods that are being in the Atlantic Ocean. So the existing researchers, the past researchers have established that the melt rate is different for different sites, but the representation of the code is not doing the right geometry. So as you can see, we are trying the different geometrical representation on the left. And on the right is the blown up image of the one in the yellow. And we are trying to get the most existing lively representation of the iceberg, so that how the melt rate will be different and we can budget the accurate freshwater collection. That will be all.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Burkle. I'm an assistant professor here at the Climate Change Institute, and I have a joint appointment with Cooperative Extension. And I do a variety of different things in those two roles, but with CCI, I have a research role, and my interests are climate variability, particularly in the North Atlantic and Arctic. And as with Extension and also with CCI and the Maine State climatologist, and in that role, I provide climate services, which is providing data interpretation and working with stakeholders on issues of climate and weather for Maine. And I've been with the Institute for a long time, and I began developing Climate Reanalyzer for the Institute about 10 years ago. And that is a data visualization framework for accessing a variety of climate models and climate data, weather forecasts, and also as the state climatologist, I took a portion of that and put it into the Maine Climate Office website, and I'm also building up the Maine Climate Office as a climate services for the university and for Maine. But if you have any questions about where to access climate data or weather data,
If you have data that you can use in your projects, feel free to let me know. My office is 135 Sawyer and email for@collecting.edu. Thanks. I wrote, introduce myself, so my expertise is cutting ice and basically how ice changes over time and also how ice impacts the terrestrial environment. So the video down the right hand side, the first video on the right is based on ice core. I work with a lot of ice core climate quality folks in CTI and other institutions, looking at past climate and trying to back out how the atmosphere has changed in time and relate that back to advanced retreat of glacier systems. And the model on the left hand side is a 3D model we created with structure promotion using a drone across a big bedrock outcrop. And that model is about has centimeter actors. And what we're doing there is we're basically looking at erosion rates of bedrock as a function of ice as well as post ice retreat. So again, we'll work with a range of people there. My expertise is very much centered on ice and geophysics. So the picture on the bottom right hand side, we have a lot of geophysical observations looking at internal layers of ice. As you can see, this figure here is a radioclinology image. Those layers that we see actually depict how ice is positive from snow accumulation and how ice flows, how ice is advanced and retreat. So I kind of basically predict how what we can see from the geophysics and how we can use the geophysics to understand advanced retreat flows. And the last hat that I have is I teach a number of courses. My second affiliation is School of Climate Sciences out there. And Brian, I teach the glaciology course, future course. I teach an incoming freshman class program, teach students research. And I work as a director for the Geomapping Research Program, the European program in Alaska. We have students from across the country that join us. We have a number of graduate students that join us every year from the name, working, kind of building up their teaching skills, as well as doing some research themselves. Next year, I expect to ramp up to upwards of 100 or more students participating. So I'm gonna need more graduate students as I continue to help out. Working with a range of low income first gen colleges. First they will be first gen colleges as well as undergraduate students across the country. So if you're interested in that, come find me in Sawyer.
Hi everyone, my name is Kylie Daly. I'm a research assistant professor here at CPI, as well as a part-time instructor in the ecology and environmental science program. So I have an interdisciplinary background with a PhD in environmental studies and public health. So my research program mostly falls within socio-ecological systems and health. Most of the projects that I work on and things I'm interested in probably encompass 2 or 3, if not all of these themes here. So the climate change and human health, water sanitation and health, or kind of a global acronym that you might have heard before, WASH, particular interest area of mine. Population wise, I mostly work with rural, indigenous, and in particular Arctic communities the last number of years. And most of my work involves risk assessment or epidemiological methods and with a participatory element whenever possible. Over here on the left are just 2 examples of some work that I've been involved with. So we were spared some really gory plumbing photos earlier, so I'll keep that trend going. Up here in the top left is actually a sewage lagoon, but probably one of the nicer ones you're ever to find. So this is the project health risk assessments of wastewater exposures in Arctic Canada in Nunavut. So there's some really basic wastewater treatment methods that are used in these remote small communities. And what I work on primarily is understanding that these systems do meet the needs, the hygiene and sanitation needs that all communities have, but understanding the impacts where there might be crossover with traditional activities like shellfish harvesting, fishing, hunting, that kind of thing. And then as well as a project that I've been involved with more of late that involves many people here as part of the NRT sauna is a real systems perspective look at the water resource needs of the sheep farming communities in Southwest Greenland. So I'll leave it there. Nice to see some people I haven't seen in a while. I look forward to meeting all the new graduate students as well. I'd love to hear about all of your work, particularly if you have, those social dimensions, human dimensions, and human health type interests in your work. I'd be really happy to have a chat sometime. I have an office here on the 3rd floor, actually, just beside Betty Lee. So feel free to drop by anytime or send me a note. Thanks.
Hey, everybody, I'm Greg Zorro. I'm sorry I can't be there with you guys this evening. I caught the bug that all the kids in town seem to have these days. I'm an associate professor in the anthropology department with a joint appointment in the Climate Change Institute. I've been trained as an archaeologist. My interests are drifting more into contemporary landscapes, but using the archaeological record to provide a sharper context to contemporary processes of change. So mostly I've focused on agricultural landscapes, but have taken an interest in urbanization and the environment over the last 5 or 6 years. We've been excavating in Croatia, a site that has a long-term occupation from the Iron Age into the early modern era, and trying to really understand the role of urbanization in landscape change. And this is just outside of Zadar in Croatia along the Adriatic coast. We're not excavating now, we're still processing a lot of materials, but now my interest is shifting to the living landscape of Zadar and recognizing that 2007 was this major milestone in global history where more than 50% of the human population resides in cities or is impacted by urbanization in this sense. So that number is accelerating. And so my interest now is to characterize really the unprecedented pace of change in urban settings by looking at a city like Zadar, which is a 3,000-year-old city, and the origins of it lie deep in the Iron Age, early in the 1st millennium BCE, was transformed into a Roman colony. All of this was happening in that little peninsula you see there in the lower portion of the image. We can access aerial photographs from 1968, from 1944. There's some oblique photos from the early 1920s and illustrations of historic Zadar in the early modern era and in the Middle Ages. And we have archaeological data to look at land use and landscape modification, stretching really from Iron Age into the Roman era. And what this is showing right now is that most of this urban setting was fixed right in that peninsula for most of its history, right up until really the 1940s. So what you see there is just the contrast between 1968 to 2020 of the massive growth of the urban environment. And this is happening all around the Mediterranean. And I think we have a real opportunity as an archaeologist and someone interested in archaeology and history to showcase just really the unprecedented pace of change that's happening now by projecting against this 3,000-year record of change. So I'm interested in having conversations with a lot of different people about this. I'm also interested in sort of exploring other world regions. I have a background in Latin America as well, to see how these processes of change sort of line up in terms of the pace and direction. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Tenway. I'm a professor in the Climate Change Institute and the Department of Anthropology. I'm also cooperating in a couple other units. And I am the resident planner in the Climate Change Institute. If you haven't been here before, you can find that out. So I'm an archaeologist and I work mainly in Peru, and almost entirely in Latin America. I work on climate and culture in ancient Peru. And I do a lot with El Niño, and there's some evidence of El Niño that Kelly and I found on the beach in northern Peru in 2006. I also work on ancient maritime adaptation. It may sound fishy, but it's really fun. It's all matter of scale. I am involved in intercontinental archaeological practice. I've done a lot of things involved with trying to connect North America and South America archaeologically in terms of archaeological communities more closely. I'm the current president of the Society for American Archaeology, so I'm now learning more than I ever expected about the politics of U.S. archaeology. Fascinating, different, but it's a dirty job somebody has to do. Next year. I have become engaged largely through the good offices of my graduate students in equity and archaeological practice. And we have a couple of papers, one out and one about to come out on this. Coming out of the seminar we did here, but also online. It was done online involving people both at UMaine and elsewhere a year and a half ago. Next week. And that's my signal to stop. And you will see this as a wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. My name's George Denton. I'm in this building right now, but because of the cautions I have to take, I'm in my office. I'm in the Climate Change Institute member. I've been a member for the Institute since 1972. And I'm also in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences. My interests are to examine the role of the Southern Hemisphere in producing ice ages. It's evident that the classic approach of using Milankovitch on northern ice sheets doesn't work. Certainly in the Southern Hemisphere, it doesn't work. So we're looking for other ways in which the Southern Hemisphere can influence global climate, both on the scale of ice ages and on the scale of millennial climate changes. Anyone interested in this, you can stop by and see me. I'm on the second floor of Bryant Global Sciences. And we have quite a little group working on this in various parts of the world, in Western United States, New Zealand, Tibet, Mongolia, Greenland, and Antarctica. So thank you.
I am here. Well, while that's coming up, I'll start talking. I'm Jim Fastook. I'm an emeritus professor in CCI. I wrote and maintained UMISM, the University of Maine ice sheet model. It's been applied terrestrially, but lately I've been mostly working on Mars. This is a picture of one of the polar caps on Mars that, from an ice sheet modeler point of view, is very, very interesting, why it has these scallop patterns and so forth. But my main thrust in working on Mars is climate change. Mars, 4 billion years ago, had a clement climate that supported oceans and rain and rivers and lakes and so forth. And we're trying to figure out, A, what the climate was like back then based on looking at evidence such as the kind of stuff that glaciers leave behind, all of which are climatic indicators, but also to try and figure out why the climate changed to what it is now, which is a very dry, very barren place. So climate change on another planet besides Earth. I've also worked a little bit on Mercury, bizarrely, the glaciers on Mercury, and I'm really interested in the ice sheets on Pluto, which are made of nitrogen ice and support convection, which was predicted by Terry Hughes back in the 70s. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Brenda Hall, and I'm a glacial geologist and geochronologist. I'm a professor in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences and in the Climate Change Institute. And along with Aaron Putnam, I run the UMaine Cosmogenic Isotope Laboratory, where we can obtain ages or exposure ages of landscape surfaces. I have a lot of the same research interests that George and Aaron do. I'm interested in ice ages, as well as the pattern and cause of abrupt climate change. And I also work a lot on the problems concerning the stability of the Antarctic ice sheet, both the west and the east Arctic ice sheet. And these interests usually lead me to conduct a lot of field work. I'll be going to South America in Cordillera Darwin this coming March, with any luck. And I also have active research projects in the Falkland Islands and starting some up in the Western US. I teach several classes. Glaciers in Our Landscape is 441, 541 I teach every year. A basic introduction to glaciers and their deposits. I also teach quaternary stratigraphy, which looks at some of the records that are supporting our current hypotheses about climate change. And then on an every other year basis, I do a climate, quaternary and climate science seminar in which we really read some papers about the topic. So I also do work in Maine. And this is a new project I have with Aaron and with Kat. And I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more about that. So if you're interested in any of these things, I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hall, and I work at College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor. I'm the geoscience professor there, so I teach a wide range of classes, but I have an affiliation with CCI and the School for Earth and Climate Sciences at UMaine. And I'm trained as a geomorphologist, so I've in the past done some research in glacial geomorphology and neotectonics, and I still have some active projects in Peru there. But much of my focus in the last 5 years or so has really turned to the local and regional scale, since I teach a lot of undergraduate students at COA, and we're located right next to Acadia. So I've been thinking a lot about some of the potential impacts of forecasted climate change scenarios for the coastal Maine region, particularly with regard to our watersheds and water resources, including drinking water sources like private well water. So I monitor a bunch of watersheds in Eastern Acadia, and we have stream gauges and we do some mapping work. Recently, we mapped a beaver dam outburst that buried part of a trail, and this was triggered by a kind of an intense rainfall event. So we're just working to document some of the impacts to the natural and built landscape due to these kinds of intense rainfall events. And then in the realm of drinking water, I've been working on a private well water study for the last 5 years, where we've collected water from over 250 wells in the MDI area. So we have a high spatial and temporal resolution now. We collected samples every month from some wells, and we're starting to see some of the impacts to high rain events on those wells, like elevated arsenic levels after a rainstorm in some wells. So anyway, that's what I'm working on these days, and I'm excited to meet some of you.
I don't have, so wait till you know. I don't have really much to say. I just wanted to introduce myself to everybody. My name is Doug Antrim, and nickname's Cat. Graduate students of Big Maybe, Fat Jesus, PHAD, things like that. But anyways, I want to state likes to go loud. And we measure delta O18 and delta HD in high latitude snow and ice and terrestrial waters. And we do it with a fairly new kind of technique called cavity ring down spectrometry. And we were probably one of the first places in, at least in the ice core community, to actually do those kind of measurements. So we're kind of
Thank you for that. I'm also a lot minister. I'm also the cat with line device facility. You can see on the picture here. In this software, we analyze ice cores for major and phase elements. Under high resolution using radar operation. I also run on chromatography, where we measure ions in snow, ice, and water sample. So if you want to know more about what we do in these labs, or if you have a question about ice core freezer or melting block, please come see me or send me email. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Carl Price. I'm the director of the School of Earth and Climate Sciences and also a professor at the Institute. I'm a earth scientist who uses geochemical tools to study the climate system. When I think about what occupies my time these days, it generally falls into one of these three categories. I mean, much of my research over the course of my career has been focused on Earth's climate history. From the Arctic down to Antarctica, and a lot of work in the North Atlantic, a lot of work with the ice core record that Cap and Elaine were just talking about, but I do dabble in the marine record from time to time still. Like many of us, my research informs my teaching, so these days I teach classes ranging from early college and intro level, ERS 107, Energy, Environment, Climate, large intro level class. We are heavily invested in the research learning experience program that the university has been involved with lately. And then a new class is ERS 410, Sea to Sky Experience, which is a capstone experience class for our Earth and climate science students. We run it up in Alaska, but eventually we'll go to Iceland, South America, and New Zealand. And then finally, I've been getting more and more into sort of the climate solution space. So it's been working with local land trusts on land preservation and conservation issues, particularly with respect to wetlands and importance of the carbon cycle. And I've done a lot of work with statewide high school earth science teachers on the water cycle and getting students involved in water cycle issues. So thanks.
I'll tell you my name again, so you remember Andrei Kurbatov. That's how I usually pronounce it. Climate Change Institute and School of Earth and Climate Sciences, those two institutions. I have a joint appointment here. At school, I'm teaching two classes. It's geohazards and humans. It's an undergraduate class. And another class is field methods. So we're trying to prepare undergraduates to go on this expedition like this call. Sometimes with support CTI and other units. Generally, I work with this ice core, and as you can see, I'm a terrible photographer. I did this picture like a week ago at the National Ice Core Lab, and I was trying to show you this little layer of volcanic ash. And it looked really good when I took a picture inside of it, but somehow it didn't work. Anyway, what I'm working usually it's very tiny particles, and that's what I was trying to tell sort of in this image. And this particles usually spread when volcano is erupting. And the idea is like you get this layer because of global. And people usually trying to connect this impact of volcanoes and climate system. And for years, like almost last 20 years, I was really puzzled how it all works. And it seems like it's never ending problem. We have a lot of projects. We just finished some fall tour with my students, several of them working at it. And more we learn about these tiny particles, more seems like the questions we have. So it's a kind of an interesting area of research. Another part, I was involved again, with a lot of people here, pretty much everyone who does ice sports here. Was this early work with ice sports, and then we kind of switched to this blue ice area in Antarctica. And we found really old ice. And this old ice is a big story now. We have 2 or 3 projects actually right now that's sort of trying to reconstruct this paleoclimate record. Because once you get to this very old layers, they highly compressed. And that's kind of what the next topic that I have. We try to use technology like Elena showed you this laser ablation. With SCAP, we're trying to actually sample that and more like thin layers. But lately also I was involved in several projects that were using lasers to actually cut ice cores. We're using lasers to kind of use the dual property of light, where you actually kind of think of a source of beam as a source of this energy, and it's spread all over the sample, and you can kind of do 3-dimensional, like almost like image of the ice core. It didn't work well, but it didn't discourage us. So now we're actually using lasers and hyperspectral imaging, and we're trying to actually reconstruct what's on this ice cores in a higher resolution. So I really like technology, and a lot of people I work with the institute also, we work with Chow, for example, and data like processing, and I'm definitely going to get more into this field now because we collected a huge data set right now. So I'm in 138 Sawyer, and if you want to find me, send me an email. I will respond, but I got it. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Levesque. I'm an associate, it's new, professor in biology and ecology and a cooperating faculty member at the Climate Change Institute. And I didn't quite follow the brief and I have a couple of slides, but I think after this one, we can skip right to the second to last one. So basically what my lab does is we look at thermoregulatory physiology, mostly of small mammals or other things we can fit in boxes like this red squirrel here. And ultimately we'll look at that. And Becky, if you want to skip just right to the 2 slides down. The next one. There you go. Yeah. We use this to then look at both the ecological physiology, so how much it costs things in their current environment, how this might have evolved since that asteroid impact many decades ago, millions of years ago, and then hopefully predicting impacts of climate change. And so we have projects in Maine doing things like looking at flying squirrel distributions, and then Eric, who you'll all meet later, is now going to be working with me in Borneo, looking at the costs of living in day versus night for tropical small mammals. And I did want to give a quick plug, so if you want to switch to the next slide, for my class on thermal ecology. So it's offered every 2 years. It's offered this year, so it won't be offered for another 2 years now, but where we model how animals respond to climate. And so if anybody's interested in that, you can let me know. And I would love to have students from the Climate Change Institute next time around. So thank you.
So I'm Paul Mayaski. I'm the director of the Climate Change Institute. I have academic affiliations in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences, School of Marine Sciences, School of Policy and International Affairs, Business School, and Law School. I like working with a lot of different people. My great passion is basically spending a lot of time in very remote parts of the world. I've had more than 300 students that I've worked with over the years, taking them to these places. I've led several very large programs that have made major discoveries in Greenland. I've started a program in Antarctica, about 21 countries together, and most recently I led the National Geographic and Rolex Mount Everest expedition. So I work all over the world. I'm particularly interested in things like abrupt climate change. We've worked on pandemics, demonstrating how past pandemics, when they occur, why they occur, what's related to climate, and what happens to the economy. We have collaborations with many institutions, most recently at Harvard for the last 10 years. We work on water towers in Asia and South America, water towers of glaciers that hold large amounts of water. And obviously these are changing dramatically right now. Particularly interested in all sorts of extremes in climate, including things that relate to people's health, toxic substances. We have several laboratories that we work with, Elena, Cap, and Mike Handley have all contributed dramatically to providing us with excellent data. Andre already mentioned the old ICE project, but in addition to that, I'm a great believer that we need to inform the public about what we do. So I spent a great deal of time in the media, CBS 60 Minutes several times, BBC, and probably the most exciting was working on a series that James Cameron did, same fellow who did Avatar. We won an Emmy Award for the Years of Living Dangerously. Thank you.
My name is Dave Kaczynski. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Policy and International Affairs and as part of the Political Science Department. And I teach CFA, so the School of Political Policy and International Affairs. So we have courses on global governance and climate change. We offer that every 2 years. So the next time will not be this year, but next year. We also do international relations that has some elements of policy related to climate change and migration and displacement, which are related to climate migration. I am also helping to co-lead the UMaine delegation to the UN Climate Conference, COP. So we'll be in Egypt later this year. If you're interested in coming in the future, you should approach us because we'll be taking a delegation probably every year in the future. And both Cindy Eisenhower and I are working together on that. My research looked at the connection between development aid and climate migration. So how the UN and the US and the EU are spending money on projects that are on climate adaptation, specifically helping migrate. And our questions are always about the unintended impacts on that, the governance, and the role of these sort of institutions. One of my field sites is in Zimbabwe and in Kenya, and I'll be taking a sabbatical in the spring doing field work there. So interested in any grad students who are interested in policy and the connection with the UN and climate negotiations.
Hello, hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Well, greetings. My name is Aaron Putnam. I'm an associate professor in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences. And I'm interested in glacial geology and glacial chronology. And I just thought I might mention two of the two of the problems that we're interested in working on at the moment, at least, and it concerns the pattern of glaciation around the world during the last glacial cycle. And so we've worked in a number of places trying to understand why it appears that mountain glaciers achieve their maximal extent simultaneously, despite opposite inlet changes, for example, between years from changes in forcing. Some examples include the Mongolian Altai at 50 degrees north or thereabouts in the center of the Asian continent, the Khumbu Glacier foreland in the shadow of Mount Everest in the southern flank of the Himalaya. This is an effort that was part of the National Geographic and Rolex expedition to Mount Everest that Paul led, and also work in the Southern Alps of New Zealand on the other side of the planet, as well as a number of other places such as the Western United States and places in China. But one of the things that we've found by developing surface exposure chronologies for these landscapes using the techniques that Brenda mentioned from our lab was that glacier systems attain their maximum value, maximum conditions as early as about 65,000 years ago and repeatedly advanced into their LGM belts until about 18,000 years ago, despite what a complete change in orbital forcing. And so we're interested in what mechanisms kept the global climate locked into a glacial state and what jarred it out. So that's one problem. And Becky, would you mind advancing to the next slide? There's one more little problem that I thought I would mention that is kind of interesting. It concerns the millennial pattern of climate change in the last glaciation, in particular the late glacial reversal. And this is a work that we're carrying on that was started by Bjorn Andersen, a friend of the Climate Change Institute, going back to the days of CliMap. I was lucky enough to join Bjorn in 2011 to revisit his master's thesis in southwestern Norway. Observes a spectacular set of moraines that were constructed at the culmination of a late glacial readvance there. It's a rather famous place because it harbors the Esmark moraine, which is the first moraine identified as such by Jan Esmark back in 1824. So this Bjorn always wanted to know the age of this landscape and moraines. And so unfortunately Bjorn died. This photograph was from his last the last field work that we conducted together in Lysefjord, Norway. So he died before we were able to get any chronology, but now we're continuing his work and developing chronology for southwestern Norway for when the ice retreated onto land during the last deglaciation and when it underwent a resurgence and constructed moraines at the culmination of a late glacial reversal. So we have a project in Western Norway in honor of Bjorn as well. But anyway, we're doing that and some other things. And if anyone is interested in chatting about, I'd be more than happy to. I'm on the second floor of Bryan Global Sciences Center, and it'd be great to get to discuss these items with you and as well. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Rickard. I am an associate professor in communication and journalism. We're all the way in Dunn Hall. Have you heard of it? It's by the hall. I'm also affiliated with the Mitchell Center and the Aquaculture Research Institute. So I'm sure you're thinking, how does this all relate? So I'm a social scientist, and generally speaking, I try to understand the role of communication, and communication can be a lot of things. It can be social media, it can be public engagement, it can be, how people talk to one another face to face. I'm really interested in how that relates to issues of health, risk, science, and environment. So in the past, I've done quite a bit with climate change communication. This is actually a figure from a study that was published in Nature several years back, where the authors essentially claimed that, we could tell people about this so-called departure date, after which, the climate would be different than it's ever been in the measurable past. So my colleagues and I were like, well, that's actually an empirical question as to whether that would actually affect people. Like, does that change their perceptions of risk? And in turn, does that make them want to do anything? So we did a study and essentially found out that kind of, but not really. And it depends. which is the way that lots of social science research goes, but it's still important to look at. So I do messaging studies. I try to understand perceptions of risk related to things like climate change. I do a lot with trust and attribution of responsibility. So you're probably wondering about this, but I worked in a lot of national parks and tried to understand visitor injury, but not just why people get hurt, but sort of what happens and how do they ascribe responsibility when that happens. And in turn, how does that influence management decisions and things like that? And it gets even more interesting when we factor in posting on Instagram and things like that. I've done things with our perceptions of visuals associated with severe weather. So how do we look at codes of uncertainty, and in turn, how does that affect risk perceptions and information processing and things like that? And finally, I do quite a bit of work since the aquaculture part. I do a lot of work on public engagement and public perceptions of aquaculture development, specifically in Maine, but also more recently in places like California and Florida. If you've heard anything about Belfast and Bucksport and all of the hullabaloo about building land-based salmon aquaculture, I have NOAA funding to study that. We found some pretty interesting stuff. And so I'd love to talk to you all about it if you're interested. One last plug, I do teach 2 graduate seminars. One is on risk communication. I get, in the past, I've had quite a few students from CCI, also from the NRTs, the Conservation Science NRT, the One Health NRT have joined that, and it's been really fun to have them. I also teach a seminar in communication theory. So if you're interested in any of those classes, let me know. Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Jasmine Saros. I'm a professor in the School of Biology and Ecology and the Associate Director of CCI. I'm a paleontologist and a lake ecologist. And broadly, my group focuses on lake ecosystem response to climate and atmospheric deposition. And we use paleontological tools to reconstruct environmental change. We look at different types of fossils. We primarily use diatoms, but we've actually expanded quite a bit in the last few years, so much so that I think we have to rename ourselves. We are currently the diatom ecology lab. I think we're now aiming for being the lake ecology lab. We have a new little logo for that. We've started using pigments and also environmental DNA in lake sediments. So we're expanding the tools that we're using. And we do quite a bit of work in Greenland, US Rocky Mountains, and also in Maine. I'm also the director of the SANA NRT, the Systems Approaches to Understanding and Navigating the New Arctic, NRT. There's a photo of our recent trip to South Greenland in June. I just wanted to mention it because we have opportunities for all graduate students in this program. There's a number of courses that are being offered. For example, Arctic Complex Systems, Arctic Law and Policy. So if you have any interest, please come talk to me.
Hi, can everyone hear me? I'm hoping good. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay, I'm Kristen Schild. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Earth and Climate Sciences. I am also the coordinator for the UMaine Arctic Initiative. So if you're interested in meeting a community that's really focused on Arctic change and impacts in Maine, things like that, please let me know. I'm happy to add you. We have a seminar series. For my research, by training, I'm a physical glaciologist, but I have a focus on ice ocean or ice water interactions and using both field measurements and remote sensing. So satellite imagery, in-field remote sensing, so drones, sonar, some of the projects that my group is currently working on. As Hari mentioned, we're working on constraining iceberg geometries in models, and also predicting freshwater flux globally. And so right now the models are not doing a great job of deciding where all that fresh water should discharge from, and icebergs are this point source that move. And so this can really impact ocean circulation, among other climate factors. And so that's one of the big questions we're trying to constrain right now.
as well as just glacial history and how changes and how that's evolved with time. So how glaciers and the oceans have interacted with time. So that's me.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I cannot join in person today as I'm out of town for a conference. So I'm Yongjiang Zhang, and I am an assistant professor of plant physiology, School of Biology and Ecology, and also associated with CCI. So I'm a experimental biologist, and in my lab, we are studying plant response, physiological response to climate change and drought. The systems we are studying include like savannas in China, rainforest in China, and also the white blueberry systems. We are using those like field setup, like warming chambers or climate chambers to manipulate climate change. For example, manipulate the climate situation at the end of this century and see how plant will respond. So that's the basic science side, and we are also working a lot on application side. Basically, we tried to develop new techniques or testing some techniques to mitigate the climate change effects on farms or agriculture systems like the white blueberries. And this is just a photo. The background is just a photo of the white blueberry farm in Maine. So we are testing different techniques, like, for example, UAV-based sensors, and introduce precision agriculture tools to the white blueberry system. And we are also testing some like techniques like biochar, how we can use biochar to enhance the soil water holding, so the system can be better adapted to drought and could be better adapted to future drought. And we are also testing some like nanotechnologies, like nanomaterials and nanocellulose produced here at the UMaine, how they can protect plants during the drought, for example. Yeah, so if you are interested in any aspect of those or interested in collaborating, please send an email or we can chat in person. Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Ivan Fernandez. I'm a professor in the School of Forest Resources and the Climate Change Institute and the School of Food and Agriculture. I primarily study biogeochemistry of ecosystems and their response to changing atmosphere, from climate change to atmospheric deposition. And particularly have spent a lot of time around long-term ecosystem change and some experimental systems, typically watersheds, Bear Brook in eastern Maine, Howland in about a half-hour north of the campus, watersheds in Acadia National Park, or Weymouth Point up on Suncook Lake. That was all of them experimental or paired watersheds, where one watershed has been disturbed in one way or another, and we study over the long term the changes that take place. I also do a lot of work on carbon, both the real science as well as a lot having to do with policy and politics around carbon in our current world. In the next couple of years, we'll be spending a lot of time around the development of the top image there, the Maine Climate Science Information Exchange. That's federal funding to develop a climate science coordination office here in the state. It's a statewide service in support of the Maine Climate Council and state government and the implementation of climate action here in the Maine. In the state. It's focused here on the campus and with a particular focus on areas around marine ecosystems and coastal communities as one of the three legs, forests and forest products, and then agriculture and food systems, with also a connection to data and monitoring, and some of that involving Sean Burkle and the State Climate Office. And then the image at the bottom is the cover that hopefully many of you recognize of the State Climate Action Plan, Maine Won't Wait. Been involved with sort of the linkage between science and policy and the development of climate policy here in the state for a long time, for 20 years, but for about 8 years, we were not doing a lot. And in 2019, the new administration came into play, and in 2020, we had a new climate action plan. And I'm one of the two scientists on the Maine Climate Council. I co-chair its Science and Technical Subcommittee. I'm on the Natural Working Lands work group of the council. And there's a few different sort of assignments that I have for the Governor's Office of Policy and Innovation in the future. A lot around natural climate solutions, carbon, and policy around forests and soil health. So I'm very interested in the work that we all do in the Institute and the linkages to the development of particularly the Maine climate response. And I'm happy to talk with anyone at any time in that regard. Thanks.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. So I'm Jacqueline Gill. I'm an associate professor with a joint appointment in the School of Biology and the Climate Change Institute. And I direct the BEAST Lab, which stands for Biodiversity and Environments Across Space and Time. So we do a lot of different things in the lab, as you can see from the collection of emoji over here. One of the big kind of pillars would be the causes, but especially consequences of Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions. We do some both paleo and modern work on climate-driven range shifts with a focus on plants, trees, and alpine communities particularly. We've started working with some of Maine's tribal nations to look at indigenous land management through time. We do a lot of work on biotic interactions in paleo records, whether that's herbivores eating plants or seabirds eating marine nutrients and then pooping them on land. And we have also got a postdoc who's recently joined us, who'll talk a bit more about her work if she hasn't already. Sorry, I was teaching a lab. Working on the impacts of a big ecological upheaval, in this case, the asteroid impact that signaled the end of the dinosaurs and ushered in the modern ecological era that we live in now. So you might come to me if you're interested in any of these topics. We kind of take a community ecology and biogeography focus in our work. We work in North America, across the Bering Land Bridge, and also in the Falkland Islands. You might also be interested in some of the graduate level courses that I teach, specifically A&T Bio 510, which is Climate, Culture, and the Biosphere. Greg Zaro and I will be teaching that in the spring. That's one of the required courses for the certificate in interdisciplinary climate studies. I also, in alternating springs, teach Bio 572, which is paleoecology. So if you're interested in those, definitely let me know. And I also, in the lab, we do a lot of outreach. Specifically, I do a lot of science communication, including on social media. We do a lot of podcasting. I've done storytelling and science communication workshops. So if you're interested in those sorts of things, I'm happy to chat with you. You might also be interested in some of the podcasts that we've worked on. I was the co-founder and co-host of one of the first climate podcasts, Warm Regards, which is since wrapped up its run last year. And we've just successfully kickstarted a new podcast that Phoebe Cohen at Williams College and I will be running called Jackson Phoebe Make a Planet. So we'll be going through all of the major big events in Earth history that led to the modern world today. And we're going to end with the two of us making an apple pie. So if you are familiar with Carl Sagan, this is inspired by the quote, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. So we're going to go through all of those really big events in Earth's history. And we're really hoping that this will be a great teaching resource for those of you who teach courses on paleoecology, climate, and sort of deeper time perspectives. So we'll have multiple ways that you can engage with the podcast and also infographics that are designed specific for each episode. So it'll be a limited run show that'll come out sometime next year. And thanks.
The next one we have is just a video, so.
Hi all.
Oh, maybe.
Hi all, I'm Dave Reed Miller, Director of the Climate Center at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute and an external associate with the Climate Change Institute. For those that don't know, GMRI is an 80-person nonprofit whose mission is to develop and deliver collaborative solutions to global ocean challenges. And with the foremost global ocean challenge of our time being climate change, we launched our Climate Center 2 years ago with the aim of delivering climate services to coastal and marine stakeholders through a user-focused science engagement solutions framework. We're in the process of staffing up to fully realize this vision, but you can see the type of capacities we currently have in white or are planning to bring on board in yellow over the next couple of years. I'd welcome conversations with students and faculty alike to learn more and explore ways we can work together. Thank you so much.
I think Brian just came online, so if he's set to talk.
I did. I'm here straight out of class, but yeah. So I work on biodiversity questions, large spatial scales, typically big data, a lot of computational approaches, and the big global change element, climate change, and also land use change. 3 quick representative projects. The one on the left was looking at trends in biodiversity across many data sets, lots of variability, but net line is surprisingly flat. The one in the middle was with Kate Miller, who's at the Park Service, looking at migration of trees in response to climate change. And the red is where they could migrate if there wasn't any land use change, and the blue is where they've actually migrated. So the bottom line is all the blacktop we put out there. This is over 100-year time frame. So all the blacktop we have down there between Washington, D.C. and Boston is really interfering with the natural response to climate change, which is migrating to track climate change, which of course has worked through all these glacial cycles. But there's a real question whether it's going to work in present day land use change. And the logo on the right is for a large EPSCoR grant with Vermont. And Barracuda stands for Biodiversity and Rural Communities Adapting to Climate Change Using Data Analysis. So it's kind of got 3 big teams looking at organismal response to climate change, trying to really downscale the models to get 1 kilometer or 10 kilometer, 10, 20-year kind of predictions. Also getting into a lot of detailed modeling of crop response yields as well as rain shifts. There's a rural community component, specifically looking at agricultural farmers and crop switching and some other adaptive behaviors to climate change. And there's a big data tool component to it. So that's it. And yep, that's it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all participants. I think we put together a really big collaborative project. At least 40 of us are working on this document. Good job.